We're back again. This is Rev Bruce with Coffee and Chat. Definitely embracing today, embracing what we have going on today. And I'm celebrating. I'm celebrating it's Black History Month. I'm celebrating that it is a time for us to share, a time for us to get busy with what we know is the thing to do. And so I'm just looking at it today to go into a little bit about cooperative economics, cooperative economics in the Black community, in how it has been shaped and how it has turned out, and some different things that we can look at today as we begin to spark a little bit of discussion, a little bit of understanding of where cooperative economics has had a place in Black history and where cooperative economics can take us further in this endeavor. And so I'm going to be dropping some things primarily through a shared screen here. And I want to look at some individuals and some incidents that happened within Black history that can give us some inspiration for going further with cooperative economics. Cooperative economics is definitely a concept that folks have looked at. And when I say cooperative economics, I am talking about the same thing that Dr. Karenga talked about. I'm talking about the same thing that some folks may not know beyond Kwanzaa, but the Nguza Saba cooperative economics, Ujamaa, right? That ability to work together and produce and have collective responsibility. That Ujamaa is that responsibility that we have as individuals, as a group, to put our resources together. And it's not always money. Sometimes it's that volunteerism. Sometimes it's that collective think tank that helps people see what really is the issues that are going on. And so when we talk about this cooperative economics, and I'm speaking of it right now, I'm speaking in the sense of this concept that comes out of the Nguza Saba that deals with Ujamaa, that deals with this collective responsibility. We talk about collective work. We talk about, all these other things in that, but we also need to look at it from the perspective of how is this something that we can utilize to strengthen our community. When I talk about our community right now, I'm talking about the Black community. This is the same thing that is a general principle that's applied within other communities where people collectively pool their resources in order to sustain their communities, and then B, in order to maintain and enhance their communities, right? And so it's not just about restoring and surviving. A lot of it is to look at how do we create a living legacy, and how do we create something that lives beyond us in legacy. And so let's think about that. Consider it. Numerous Holocaust survivors have worked together to collectively pool their resources in order to maintain a memory dedicated to those that survived and those who were, eliminated, during that period of time. It's something that other groups do, and something that we need to look at as far as how do we rectify a mindset that is not simply a mindset of being taken care of, but how do we take care of our own with this collective responsibility of cooperating and pooling our resources together. We pool our resources together in order for things to be better, for things to be supported, for things to be developed, for things to be enhanced. And so when we talk about that, we're talking about education, we're talking about social issues, we're talking about educational issues. Like I said, we're talking about issues that deal with youth development, right? If you're waiting on the city government to develop a youth center in your community, you may be too late for them to actually do an intervention on what's going on with gun violence and other things that are happening in your community. If you're waiting on the city government to take care of certain things, you may be waiting too long for something to happen. You need to, as we get into it, own your own. And so let's talk about that. Let's chat about that. Let's talk about that in a sense, and you know, throw back, you know, questions at me, throw back issues at me, throw back statements, comments, whatever, put it in the chat, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch, put it in the chat. You know, I'm trying to keep up with it, and God bless. And so to take a long look at it, like I said, this is coming from the Nguza Ujamaa. This is cooperative economics, and it comes from these 7 principles that we look at when we talk about Kwanzaa, but it also is something that we can look at as far as principles and standards for sustaining a community, for, you know, maintaining a family. This is when we talk about it takes a village. If it takes a village, then we have to take a village approach in order to have such things. And cooperative economics can be as simple as pooling a portion of your resources and putting them together in a group. People do that when they create a mutual fund, right? And when they create a foundation, and they put these resources together for a defined purpose, and then they manage those resources and how those resources are distributed throughout for those who are in need. That's what the church is doing. The church does that when they collect funds, and then they redistribute those funds for, you know, orphans, widows, and those who are in need. That's the principle behind that. And so when we talk about cooperative economics in this sense, coming out of the Nguza, here's something we have to look at. I know people get into, you know, where does this principle come from and how is this set up? And I want you to see the power of the principle beyond the person who presents them, beyond the person who initiates them, beyond the person who delivers the message about them. See the principle beyond the person. I know a lot of people have issues of late with Dr. Karanga and all the things that he was able to establish with Kwanzaa. And listen, if we can we get the message without being stuck on who the messenger is and what type of character flaws he or she may have in his or her past? Can we get the principles of that? I didn't agree with everything W.E.B. Du Bois said, but here it is. I'm still going to present something that W.E.B. talked about in cooperative economics in Black history. So I don't have a problem with still picking and choosing my battles. And one of the things that I can see is I can see the beauty and the power of the principle of cooperative economics. And so get beyond the person and get with the principle, and let's see beyond this, okay? And so let's look at this from a sense of, when we talk about cooperative economics, you cannot expect the government or any other institution to support or strengthen economic growth in your community, right? It's happened to where people have simply laid down and said, "Hey, well, you know, the government's got a program for that. They got something for that. You know, they can help us out with that. They got something down there." And we end up referring people down to the social services and the welfare office, the WIC office, and Planned Parenthood, and all these places that people are being referred to by counselors and pastors and social workers. And let's be honest, those things are not set up for us to gain. Those things are set up for us to go to and get assistance, right? Those are set up for assistance. Listen, there was never an intent for welfare to be an alternative to working. There was never an idea that unemployment would be something that you would do instead of working, that you would have those as temporary assistance to move on. The only established program that would be an extensive, to the end of life program that was established pretty much has been coming out of the New Deal and the Depression, Social Security. Beyond that, we are looking at programs from the government that are simply a boost, simply a stimulus. The check that somebody's waiting on right now. That's what it is. It's just a stimulus. It's just a boost. It's not something that will sustain you. It's something that'll help you move along, but it's not something that will sustain you. It is just something that will help you move along. And so understand the difference, that the government isn't in the business of building programs that people live off. That's not the government's intent. That's not the government's strength. And so watch out if you end up dealing with, a lot of programming as opposed to, development and stimulus within that programming. And here we go. This is part of where it gets real big, and it gets real big for us. And I'll add this slideshow to the YouTube description later. But FDR's New Deal was met with a lot of criticism back in the day. FDR's New Deal was met with a lot of criticism back in the day, particularly from A. Philip Randolph and individuals like that who saw this New Deal as something that was going to promote second-class citizenship for African Americans. It was coming at a time where economic depression needed a boost and America needed a turnaround. And so here's what FDR New Deal presented. It basically repackaged much of what the church was already doing, much of what co-ops were already doing. And you have to keep in mind, historically, right, co-ops were operating in the 1800s, particularly with farmers and other groups. Go back and look at the Elaine Massacre. Go back and look at the Elaine Massacre and see what that was about. That was really an effort to see if, sharecroppers and poor white farmers could work together and see what that whole effort was about. You see a little bit of it in the Great Debaters when it talks about farmers coming together and sharecroppers coming together and white and black, poor, and trying to find a solution. But that was about cooperative security. And when you look at the New Deal took a lot of what the co-ops and the church and other societal groups had been doing long before the government got involved. And so even back before they started the AME Church, Richard Allen and Absalom Jones started the Free African Society in 1787, which was this organization that helped with services and mutual aid for free Africans and their descendants, just in the area of Philadelphia. The Negro Cooperative Guild, W.E.B. Du Bois, he started that in 1918 with the idea of advancing cooperation among Black people. And UNIA, Marcus Garvey, one of the most popular movements of African Americans and African people of African descent throughout the world. He dealt with not only racial pride and formation of an independent Black nation in Africa, Pan-Africanism, but he also focused on economic self-sufficiency, right? And then we get to Reverend William Washington Brown, where he was a former slave, former Union soldier who organized the Grand Fountain of United Order of True Reformers, right? They're known as the True Reformers, right? And this organization became the largest and most successful Black business enterprise in the United States between 1881 and 1910. They also, as we'll find out later, formed the first Black-owned bank, right? So think about that, right? The economic power of organizations to form banks, to come up with different cooperative groups to work together was nothing new. And so everything that they did and supported people, individuals, families, refugees with, the government came up with repackaging it through this new deal. And like I said, that was met with some degree of, I don't know, from the Black community. And so in looking at this, the issue is the government is not in the business of, that's not their main thing, programs. That's not their business. And so we have to look at it also that there is a legacy of independent wealth and collective wealth. Sarah Rector, known as the Millionaire Girl, a member of the race, right, which was the richest colored girl in the world. She was, an African-American member of the Muskogee or Creek Nation, right? Remember, Native Americans were displaced, right? Indigenous people were displaced from the southeast of the United States, and they were moved into what was called the Indian Territory, Oklahoma, the Midwest. And so in doing so, right, they put these people on this land where later oil was discovered on the land. And so this woman became one of the richest, right? One of the richest Black females of her time, right? And so here it is. Before she was 18, right? She had already been a millionaire. She owned stocks, bonds, a boarding house, businesses, and a 2,000-acre piece of prime river bottom land, right? And so at that point, she left Tuskegee and with her entire family moved to Kansas City, Missouri. She purchased a house on 12th Street that is still there and known as the Rector House. The house has been purchased by a local nonprofit with the intention of restoration and historical and cultural preservation. Somebody saw the value in this and saw that, as we discussed, there needs to be a historical preservation of your own history. Otherwise, you will be in a position where your history is hidden or covered, or it will take a lot of digging to discover it if you don't go through it. This is just one example of someone who excelled, right, financially at a time where Jim Crow was going on, right? And here we go. Black-owned banks. The most recent figure shows that there are 22 Black banks in America as of the first quarter of 2019. That number was down from 48 in 2001, but that number is still, up in the air right now at 2021, as we have COVID and we have other issues where banking has changed and how people use banking has changed. We now, as you'll see, we've got Greenwood, we've got One United, and we have these other aspects of Black banking that are, being instituted, but we still are down, right, from the count of Black-owned banks that were in existence. And so here it is. Like I said, William Washington Brown, a former Georgia slave who founded the first ever Black-owned bank in America, right? Listen, he founded it in 1888. The bank opened with deposits on the first day of more than $1,269. I don't know what the value of today's dollars that would be, but imagine a group of people collectively putting their money together to open a bank, right? A group of people collectively putting their money together to start a credit union, a group of people opening a financial institution to provide small business loans, a group of people putting their money together to stimulate and generate more economic growth in their community, right? And so Reverend William Washington Brown established the bank to serve the financial interests of Black depositors. That's what their intent was. One United Bank is the premier bank for urban communities, the largest Black-owned bank, the first Black internet bank, and a community development financial institution, right? They're doing it. Founded in 1921 by 5 Black businessmen today. Citizens Trust Bank is a federally certified CDFI and one of the largest African-American owned financial institutions in the nation with assets of more than 388 million, right? Citizens Trust Bank is a Black-owned bank. And so there are still Black-owned banks in operations. Inglewood has a Black-owned bank, right? New Jersey, right? New York, they're Black-owned banks. Kansas City has Black-owned banks, right? But we often don't talk about it. And so when we talk about understanding the power of cooperative economics, this is just one example of people coming together, utilizing their funds, and starting something together. The solution is simple, right? It's simple, coming together, putting our resources together, right? Pooling those, having a collective purpose, and orchestrating that, activating that, instituting it, initiating it, getting it started and getting it done, and making sure that it carries on. What's getting in the way of making sure it carries on? What's getting in the way of getting it started? Typically, we're in our own way. Typically, we're not willing to work with each other in order to get it done. And so let's get beyond that. Let's get beyond what, stereotypes may be. Let's get beyond distrust. Let's get into, listen, if you enter into any business venture, there is an element of risk, right? If you enter into any business venture, there's an element of risk. I know we've seen Raisin in the Sun and the Sun, taking the money and putting it at risk and all these other things. Listen, there is an element of risk in any business venture. I don't care if you're cutting grass. I don't care if you're, selling jeans. I don't care if you're reselling products that you create and putting them on Redbubble and Etsy. There's an element of risk that you could be, guess what, wasting your time. You could be wasting your money. You could be wasting your resources because no one is buying your product. No one is signing up for your service. No one is paying attention to your blog posts. No one is paying attention to your YouTube videos. But guess what? There still is the effort. The effort is what makes a difference. And so what makes this a real simple solution is, like I said, the principle. The principle makes this a simple solution. The principle sets this up to where we can see that as a collective, right? As a collective, we are putting resources together for a better community, for a stronger family, right? Robert Allen, in his book, Multiple Streams of Income, Robert Allen stresses creating a family LLC, a family trust, so that you can not only have funds generated within their real estate investment trusts, stocks, bonds, other investments and savings, right? But that you could also distribute funds to family members while you're alive, and in case of your death, they're not upheld within a will, and the trust continues to go. And as members are expanded in your family, as members grow within your family, you adjust your trust to include those members based upon their positions. As you decline in age, pass that trust over to a trusting family member, a spouse, older child, anything of that nature, and then have those documentations, right? Have the legal documentation that states what the intent of the trust is and how the trust operates, so that the paperwork dictates how the trust moves along, not the person, right? It needs to be the paperwork, not the person, because the paperwork will get into the purpose and the process and procedures and policies as opposed to the person. That's how people get hurt and break up over stuff. Listen, it's usually about money. Usually about money, and sad to say, if we don't take care of it on the front end, we will boo-hoo on the back end. And so I want you to understand, the family trust, the family LLC is a possibility. And so that comes out of not Black economics. That comes out of, Robert Allen, right? And, one of his books, multiple streams of income. And I'll put that up here, just so y'all can see it. Make sure that you guys take a look at it. Robert Allen, a lot of different groups, a lot of different books. No Money Down. One of my favorite books of Robert Allen was Multiple Streams of Internet Income. And, that's how I started blogging. That's how I started getting into multimedia early on, because that was, something that he was talking about. And I didn't take it on fully until recently. And so this has been something that you definitely want to take into consideration. And as you generate more income and you create more wealth, then much like people that have wealth do, you redistribute some of that wealth by giving back, by creating an endowment, by creating a foundation, setting that up to where you send or distribute funds to a college fund, United Negro College Fund, whatever it might be, your church, the Humane Society, whatever it might be that you support, that needs to be in your documentation. I served at Bayview Baptist Church, and part of the ministry there was to support other ministries, beyond Bayview Baptist Church with, support and ties, churches that were being planted and growing, new ministers coming to town that were trying to set up and do something as pastors that, an older church might needed a boost, or they might have had a decline. You remember, people leave church when they change pastors because people tend to be attached to one regime or another. And so when people leave churches, there tends to be a decline in offering. And when there's a new pastor, there tends to be a decline in offering because some people are in a wait and see mode to see what's going on. Go back to what that means. And so for Bayview to support other ministries was, that was amazing. That was beautiful. That was cooperative economics in supporting the ministries of other people, because after all, we are one church, one God, one baptism, one love. Here we go. And so here we go. In this idea of cooperative economics, the big idea is on your own. The big idea is on your own. And so if we have to narrow it down to anything, you've got to own your own, there's no getting around it. There's no, sugarcoating it. There's no saying, oh, well, that's just, something that people, that's just something that people bring into the community. And then, it's here, it's there. It's no. Own your own, sustain it, establish it, put it in place, make sure that it is strength and support for others, and make sure others are behind it, not just community owned, but that there are those who are with a vested interest, who are looking out for the best interest of the community on the boards of those groups, on the commissions for those groups. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But as a community, own your own, and don't have to wait on folks, right? The beauty of Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing was simply this. Sal's Pizzeria wasn't just a problem. It was that Sal was making buku bank off of these people, and then he was taking the money out of the community. How many folks operate businesses within your community and they take the money out of your community. How many people are operating gas stations, convenience stores, corner markets, eateries, and these little shops, and they're taking the money out of your community? Even your swap meet is not, your community necessarily, because people are driving in, unloading their trucks, selling their wares, and then they're moving on and taking that money somewhere else. They're not even banking within your community. And so when they're not banking within your community, and you look at the dollars that are distributed for business development, and there's not economic development within your community, there are fewer dollars to distribute based upon that branch of bank that's within your community. That's how that works when you go to a Wells Fargo, a Bank of America, a Chase, and they say, well, hey, this is what we have, this is what we distributed, and so at this time we're unable to assist you in your business loan, where you may have to go to a smaller community bank, right, a neighborhood bank, and you may have to get a smaller loan in order to get started, even though they're all SBA loan distributors. Why? Because it comes back down to deposits. It comes back down to economic development. And if you own your own, right, there's a group over here, they may have, 5 businessmen. There may be an investment group, and they are looking to support in the form of potentially venture capital. And you may have to provide a pitch, but that provides another opportunity for you to deal with another community-based group, right, who have a shared interest in possibly supporting what you have, and that could be of mutual benefit. So you may have to go out of the traditional path and go on an unconventional path, but it still may work out better. The key is own your own, and I'm going to say that, as lightly as I can. Own your own and have control over it, and the control of the resources and how they're distributed and how the process works for those resources being distributed, whether that be through a family foundation, whether that be through a family LLC, whether that be through the establishment of a cooperative partnership, right? A limited partnership, a S corporation, right? A nonprofit foundation that gives, microloans, right? Micro lending is a big thing. Peer-to-peer lending is a big thing. And so learning that and mastering that can help us as a community with this cooperative economic venture. Think about this. Own your own businesses and stores. Own your own neighborhood business development and economic growth and business incubators. Own your own cooperative partnerships and community development corporations for generating jobs within your community, stimulating economic growth, fostering innovation, and funding projects. Own your own seats on local commissions and associations that oversee local improvement projects and the distribution of those funds, as well as identifying qualified candidates for those projects. Listen, many small and minority businesses do not qualify for some of these community improvement projects that the cities and municipalities put out because the line has been drawn too high. The amount of cash reserves is not something that a small business might have on hand. And so within that, where is it that we stand in the gap and we fill in the gap and support small businesses in their development so that they can be in a position to take on larger projects? Where is it where we can begin to work with our contractors and subcontractors so that they can be in a position to manage larger projects, the development of hotels, the restructuring of streets, and all of these things that are projects that happen within local visitor bureaus, local tourism bureaus, also with local municipal rehab projects. If you live in most cities, you know what the streets are like. You know the last time they've been paved. You know the last time the lines have been painted. Come on. You mean to tell me somebody needs $2 million in the bank to do a street painting project, come on, that's not necessary. And so those things have been set up to where the larger scale organizations have been able to benefit from it. And that's passes on from city to city and county to county. Some of those things have been mirrored, right? They've been reflected in policy and process. And so what would it take for us to simply be on the commission and add that X number of projects need to go to women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, small businesses. X number of projects need to include subcontracts to, businesses of mid-size, businesses of small size, right? And also X number of projects need to kick back to the government a percentage for, business development, business training, entrepreneur training, those things in nature to where these smaller businesses could benefit and eventually grow while they are in development. These projects don't have to be projects that simply make the big bigger. These projects can be run, and if you have your own community development corporation, you can apply for these projects, and then you can manage who you have working on these projects at what level and what constitutes a qualified candidate. That's part of the business right there. If you don't have control, you don't have control. If you don't have a process, you are subject to the process that others have and how they operate. And so many of us are disqualified before we get past the cover page because we don't have enough assets on hand. And so this cooperative economics is for us to understand. Part of that is getting a control of the process and getting in the game. What do I mean by getting in the game? If you can't even get your stuff together to put in a bid for the project, you are not in the game. You are not even able to line up at the starting line for the race. And so think about it. When you have these community block grants and these community development programs, it may take you a year to prepare and get those assets together to be ready to be on the starting block for the next year. But get the information, know what you need to do, and get there and get a hold of it. If you're operating in partnership with a local CDC, operate in a partnership with a local business incubator. If you see that you're struggling, check out your community, do some market research, put out some polls and some surveys. Is anyone else having this same issue? Because maybe collectively you can apply as a collaboration, as a cooperation, as a CDC, or even a local business partnership. But do that and then see where you can not only gain control and access, but then where can you gain enough footing to reach back and help someone else get in the game along with you. It's cooperative. It's something that we should do together. It's cooperative economics. Cooperative economics tells us that we need to create opportunities within Black communities and among circles of Black professionals and entrepreneurs that produce the likes of a Madam C.J. Walker and a Sarah Rector. We need to contribute to arts collectives and support the development of historical societies that maintain archives and artifacts of our own history and culture. I mean, come on. I probably was in my, what would I say? I probably was in my, late 20s when I learned that there was actually a Black automaker in the United States, right? And I was thrown off, blown away. Like, wait a minute, Black folks actually made cars, and like, what are you talking about? And so the Patterson Car Company, right? Patterson Car Company. They used to be a company that the father ran, where they dealt with, a horse and carriage company. They would fix buggies. They would fix carriages. And eventually, when the son took over, he saw the emergence of the horseless carriage, and he said, we're gonna shift, we're gonna pivot, and they moved to creating horseless carriages. The cars sold for about $850, right? And they had a couple of models, and they competed with Henry Ford and the Model T. Listen, they competed with Henry Ford and the Model T. And if you understand, the Model T was one of the most popular cars at that time, but Patterson was a competitor of Ford. And when we look at that, Patterson eventually got into making buses and trucks and became one of the largest contractors with schools, right, for busing. And so as things transitioned, that's how their business transitioned. And so think about that. That's part of our history that a lot of people don't know, that deals with economic development. That's part of our history that a lot of people don't know and understand, that deal with economic development. Listen, if you're going to do something, start by educating yourself. Learn more about how to incorporate cooperative economics into your work. How do we, develop our community? How do we build a legacy of resiliency and sustainable wealth with this community that it can last for generations? Restoring a Black family. That gets to the roots and principles of much of what I talked about. That's Jawanza Kunjufu. Reclaiming the urban family. Dr. Willie Richardson came and did a whole thing with the men of Bayview Church for our men's retreat one year, and has continued to have reaching effects, this book, throughout the U.S. And Smart Money Moves for African Americans by Kelvin Boston. This was a book that I found early on when I started really getting into, investments and, and business, and looking at business development and what could I do and what skills can I use. And I really challenged myself to get into it more and find out what were some things that were available to me at that time. What were some things that I could use and see. And this book, man, this book was very basic, and it really showed some things that we could do. Other people have followed up with similar books, Tavis Smiley, and, with the Agenda for Black America. I believe that some other folks have done similar books, but this is really a book that kind of got me springboarded on some things and some ideas, and then also helped me see from another perspective that it's not all Fortune 500, right? Economic development is not all Fortune 500, and part of it is when we start to focus and see where there is opportunity, then we begin to follow up and make moves that can help us, create our own legacies, right? And so that was Smart Money Moves for African Americans by Kelvin Boston. I loved the book. It was something that, really got me, like I said, got me started. And so as I conclude, I just want to make sure that I throw this out there. You've got to remain in a position where you understand what you have, right? And so I want to spend this month going into some aspects of Black history that, somebody else can tell you about Harriet Tubman. Somebody else can talk to you about, George Washington Carver, and you're going to get that throughout this month. You're going to get stamps. You're going to get all these other things, and I'm not dogging anybody for that. We do need to sustain that, but I'm trying to dig into some other things that you might not normally hear, that you might not normally see, that you might not normally get a hold of all the time. And so I'm going to be doing this every Saturday in this month, digging into some culture, some history, some aspects that we have as a legacy. Towards the end of the month, I'm going to look at it. What is Black faith? What is Black faith? Because we talk a lot about, the white man's religion and all this other stuff. And then we talk about stuff that is New Era religion. But is it really New Era, or was it something that got taken from, quote unquote, the East that really came through the continent, the motherland? And what is it? What are we talking about? How have we survived all this time? And so this is part of where I am in wrapping this up. Like I said, I will put this whole presentation on the YouTube description by tomorrow. You can go on, click on it, pick it up. But definitely, if you get a chance, share this video with somebody that may not have known that there was a Black automaker. Share this video with someone that may not have ever heard of Sarah Rector. Share this video with somebody that may not have heard of the Nguzo Saba and the 7 principles and Kwanzaa and all that. You don't know how much of an impact you can have with someone and how you can touch them and make this, a better situation for them than to think that, okay, Black history is regulated to Harriet Tubman freed the slaves and the Underground Railroad, and then Martin Luther King, had a dream. Malcolm X was talking about by any means necessary, and we got Obama in the White House, and now we've got Harris as the first African-American woman VP. It's more than that. It's beyond that. And we have so much in between all that our political activity even today is minimal compared to where it was in the 1800s when folks were catching hell for going to vote. And so imagine that, and then look at the numbers of Black senators and congressmen and all political positions we have is dismal compared to where we once were. And so how do we regain that? How do we strengthen that? And so let's talk about that throughout this month. Hey, this has been Coffee and Chat with Rev Bruce. I appreciate your time. I appreciate it, and I send love your way and peace your way and blessings your way. I send it to you from my whole heart. This is a time to regain who we once were and be strengthened in it. God bless.